Kia ora and welcome to a new video from NZ Pocket Guide. Today I'm gonna go over the average cost of a trip to New Zealand so you know how much to save up for the holiday of a lifetime. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so for this video it's going to be a little bit different. I will have to use my phone because I have all the numbers right here, but let's go over everything together. And let's start with the average cost per day of a trip to New Zealand. So if we include $90 per day, which will be your average car rental, plus a private room in accommodation, which will be about $90 per day, and we're gonna add about $50 per day only for food, so you're gonna have to save up on that one, and about $100 per day for activities. That makes an average cost per day of traveling in New Zealand at around 330 New Zealand dollars. Obviously, go over the numbers yourself to see if you want to spend a little bit more or a little bit less, depending on how much you want to treat yourself. Okay, so let's go over the cost of a trip in New Zealand per the number of weeks you're traveling in New Zealand. So according to the numbers that I gave you above, if you want to travel to New Zealand for 1 week, it may cost you around 2,310 New Zealand dollars per day. Again, all the prices in this video are going to be in, I almost fell off, are going to be in New Zealand dollars. It's hard to speak, talk, read and do all that together. Anyway, let's go over 2 weeks in New Zealand. That would be around 4,620 New Zealand dollars. 3 weeks in New Zealand will be about 6,900 New Zealand dollars. And a whole month in New Zealand will be about 10,000 New Zealand dollars. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about transportation in New Zealand, just to dive a little bit deeper and so you can do some of your math yourself. Hiring a car in New Zealand can run between 30 and 150 New Zealand dollars, while hiring a 2-berth camper van can run between 60 and 260 New Zealand dollars. Those are obviously quite a wide bracket, and it will extremely depend on which time of the year you choose to traveling in New Zealand. If you wanted to travel around New Zealand on a hop-on-hop-off bus, that would be between 1,000 and 2,000 New Zealand dollars. And if you wanted to use the national coach bus tour for about a 4-hour bus trip, it would be between 30 and 80 New Zealand dollars. Domestic flights in New Zealand range between 50 to 240 New Zealand dollars. Okay, now let's move on to accommodation in New Zealand. If you're planning on doing New Zealand on a budget, you will want to stay in hostels, which range between $27 and $35 per night, and that will be in a bunk bed dorm. If you're planning on staying in a holiday park or a hostel but actually treating you to a private room, that will be between 80 and 90 New Zealand dollars. Moving on to hotels, it will be between 160 New Zealand dollars per night, I'd say, for a double room, as well as 200 to 350 New Zealand dollars for a family room. We'll add that to the article very soon. Finally, if you're planning on doing some camping, you can camp in a department or conservation campsite for about 15 New Zealand dollars. All those prices were per night. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the food. In New Zealand, the restaurant prices usually range from 30 to 40 New Zealand dollars for a main. If you want to get yourself a sandwich at a cafe, that would be about 8 New Zealand dollars. And the average price for a pint of beer, which is essential when traveling, is about $8. A Big Mac, if you are looking at the Big Mac indicator, is about $5.20 at the moment in New Zealand. If you're planning on cooking for yourself and shopping in New Zealand supermarkets, a litre of milk will cost $2.40, a dozen eggs will cost $5.40, and 500 grams of pasta will cost $1.20. There is obviously much more prices on nzpocketguide.com, just to give you an idea, but I'm just wanting to give you just a little bit of a taste of what's the cost of food in New Zealand. If you're looking to buy yourself some meat, a kg of chicken or beef mince will be about 13 New Zealand dollars. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about tours and activities in New Zealand. What I'm doing right here, hiking is always free, so make sure that you pack on a lot of free activities because the rest is going to be quite pricey. Let's go over some of the highlights, like skydiving, which costs between $360 to $470, bungee jump between $130 to $275, whitewater rafting between $100 and $150, dolphin swimming between $120 and $220, whale watching $120 to $150. Kayaking tour will be between $125 and $160. Horse trekking will be between $50 and $160. And by the way, Hobbiton, which I know is on your list, is between 90 to 100 New Zealand dollars. That's not the evening banquet, by the way, that's just the day tour. All right, let's cover some other expenses when traveling in New Zealand. There is obviously the NZDT and IVL that you will need to pay when coming in the country, but that may be included in your visa. So make sure that you check that on your own to see what the cost of that will be. There is also the flights coming to New Zealand, which same thing, depend extremely of where you're coming from. So make sure to have a look at this one as well. And you will also need to be aware of the cost of your travel and medical insurance. Okay, that's everything for me for this video. I hope that you did find it useful. There is much more for you on nzpocketguide.com, so make sure to check it out. And the whole team is joining me in wishing you the best time ever in New Zealand.